ownership in this country became a ideological issue and a partisan issue in ways that it shouldn't be. It has become sort of a proxy for arguments about our culture wars, urban versus rural. Race is always an element in these issues. Issues of, class and education and so forth. And so instead of just taking a very practical approach, like we do, let's say, for example, with car safety,
right,
where we say, all right, we got a bunch of accidents, have seatbelts, and let's make cars safer, and let's engineer roads so that we prevent them. Instead of thinking about it in a very pragmatic way, we end up really arguing about identity and emotion and all kinds of stuff that does not have to do with keeping our children safe.
And that has always been the goal. But yet at the same time, though, is it even realistic? What is up, gang? John Claymore here, and we're going to go ahead and finish off our gun series. Don't worry, I'll be leaving all 3 videos in the description box, as well as a couple of additional ones. And, of course, all the figures and numbers that I tried to scrounge up for this video. Now, I made an original video on this topic, which, by the way, is still on this channel, about can they actually take our guns away from us. And, of course, to go on top of this, there were maybe 1 or 2 inaccuracies. One thing that I said that was wrong was obviously the bill of attainder thing. I'm going to go ahead and own that up. I knew what the hell I was saying. The problem was I worded it in the worst way possible. And, of course, as many of you may know, we don't have bills of attainder, even though I said, well, we have bills of attainder, meaning that they can't exactly take something that's grandfathered in. Basically, that is what happened. And the other figure that I thought was a bit of inaccuracy was I did not exactly put in the U.S. troop force itself. However, I went online and did the best I could to get all the numbers of the current military. And let me go ahead and start this video out by saying that with red flag laws, with the ATF being the way that they are, as far as banning certain items like, say, pistol braces, things of that nature there, solvent traps, which, by the way, are constitutionally protected, it seems to me more and more that they're finding any and every way they can to attack the Second Amendment from different angles, meaning that they're trying to, I'll put it this way here, it's almost like a death by 1,000 paper cuts than actual physical confiscation. Now, let me go ahead and say this. There are over 400 million guns in this country. Okay, we have the right in some states to actually make our own weapons, and in some cases we even have the right to buy our own cannons. So it's going to be extremely hard for the federal government, just based on that alone, to even take them. As far as the logistics is concerned, that is what we're going to be talking about in this video to kind of file down this topic before we get on to the major topic of the weekend, which is going to be why it is that vets hate Hanoi Jane and are actually correct to do so, as we do more veteran-related stories. That video more than likely is going to come out on Sunday, so make sure you guys stick around for that. It may come out on Saturday. I'm not entirely sure. I just got through scripting the video, but still at the same time, I still need to get adequate footage, which is kind of hard to find. I wonder why. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the actual logistics of this, let's just say, nightmare for the federal government. The federal government has legislated on several occasions. The Brady Bill, the Crime Bill of 1994 for AR-15 bans and stuff like that. However, the problem is this here. When you ban something outright, the only thing they're doing is the shelf life ban. As I've said before, we don't have bills of attainder, so therefore you can't take something that is, how do I say, already grandfathered in, meaning that if you've already purchased it and then the ban comes out sometime afterwards, they can't actually take it. Of course, red flag laws are designed really to control people and get people ginned up against one another. I discussed that in part 3 of this series. And in part 2, I also discussed Waco, Ruby Ridge, and I also discussed Hurricane Katrina. Basically, what the federal government would like to do is try to take advantage of something like, say, a certain situation. Now, I'm going to give you guys a situation right now that's actually going on at this moment in time, even though it does not warrant any type of federal government intervention. But take a look at what's going on the East Coast with our skies and how it is that Canada's got these wildfires, just as an example. What if it was a raging fire, and what if it got beyond the borders of Canada and just, I mean, that's unrealistic. What if something happened, like, say, in like New Hampshire or Maine or Vermont, somewhere in the New England area? Which, by the way, is where they're actually doing a lot of these red flag gun law seizures at. They're doing it in a lot of these very blue states. So a couple have been recorded in Massachusetts. Of course, there's been one that occurred in Connecticut, one that occurred in Rhode Island. There's also an incident that occurred in Maryland where an old man got shot. I think the same exact thing happened in Connecticut, too. Don't worry, I'll try to leave all the links I can in the description box. But here's the thing that really and truly gets me on this. They would want to use the National Guard to do that. Now, this is where we need to talk about the overall military size. Our military, boots on the ground force, as you guys have seen, the U.S. Army is right around 500,000. You estimate the National Guard across the country, you're probably looking at altogether about a 750 to 800,000 man boots on the ground force. Of that boots on the ground force, however, only about a third of it is actual boots on the ground, meaning that the military itself could only maybe muster maybe right around between 200 to 300,000 people, and to go on top of that, how many of them are actually active duty? I can also tell you right now the United States Marine Corps would not be used in this endeavor. I think it was right around 6-1. I got to say it that way for the algorithm, but I'm pretty sure you guys know what I'm talking about. That Nancy Pelosi wanted the Marines to be used to secure the Capitol. The problem is that at the time the Commandant of the Marine Corps said, look, I've not heard a single thing from the President, so therefore we're not going to be getting involved. Now, is that to say that the Marine Corps is better when it comes to constitutional issues or not? No, I don't think that's the case. As a prior service Marine myself, I can tell you right now that if there's something like this to occur, which, by the way, you have a Marine Corps force of right around 176,000, which is normally where we keep it. And by the way, I'm an advocate for a bigger military. But even if you had a bigger military, this would still be impossible, as I'll explain in this video. But still, here's the thing, though. If anything, the Marines would more than likely be used in overseas installations, meaning they would be used to protect certain overseas assets. Say, for example, the bases that we have in Europe, Japan. Of course, you've got the Philippines. Of course, you've got Australia, and possibly even the Middle East, possibly even Israel, wherever. This right here is where the Marine Corps would go. And, of course, that force right there would probably only be, at best, maybe a third would even be sent to these locations to provide additional troop support, whereas the rest of the Corps itself is more than likely not going to get involved, nor more than likely to be used. If you're hearing a motorcycle back there, I apologize for that. I promise it'll go away in a second. I got to record this video now when I've actually got a chance. The deadline, of course, was on Thursday night, so I need to go ahead and get this out of the way. So right off the bat, you're looking at a logistical problem there. Now, what about police? Well, here's the problem with police. Larger city police departments and maybe some more of your more liberal areas may actually go through with this, but at the same time, though, most small-town police departments and law enforcement are not going to go through with it. I mean, how many times do we have to point out the deputy sheriff got killed while on patrol and they showed up to a domestic violence incident? By the way, same thing with traffic stops. More than likely, if anything, police officers are not going to be used. And also something else, too. If you look at the crime, everything that's going on, the massive effort to defund the police department, which I find very weird because liberals keep on talking about confiscating guns, but yet they're also talking about defunding police departments. Now, somebody's going to come in here and say, well, they increased the size of the ATF. You got your 87,000 IRS agents. Dude, I don't know if you noticed or not, but if you saw that clip of these IRS agents, a lot of these people were like in wheelchairs, out of shape. This is more than likely is never going to be used. If they are used, if anything, I think it's designed to antagonize the public. Hence the fact of what I showed you guys at the very beginning of the video with Barack Obama, which of course is going to be what we're going to be discussing next, which by the way is going to be the worldwide effort. And I'll be even give you guys a bit of some personal thoughts on a story that I remember from back in 2016 time frame. But still, let's go ahead and finish this off. There's not enough police force to actually do this, and in the areas that they're at that would be used are high crime areas, so I think it would be more inclined to take care of that. Police departments are already overbooked, overstuffed as it is, so I highly doubt that they would be used in an effort to confiscate firearms. 99.9% of the people. Now, guys, I brought up the whole 400 million guns thing at the very beginning of the video. However, what I did not mention is right now on record, it's estimated to have right around 90 million actual gun owners itself. However, there's an estimated 15 to 20, maybe even 30 million gun owners that we don't really and truly know about, meaning that there are people who had weapons handed down to them. That's the estimate. I'm not saying it's the real number. I'm saying it's the estimate that the federal government has actually estimated. So more than likely, they're probably not going to happen. However, I do think that this stuff, this whole ploy about taking away braces, solvent traps, stuff like that, FRTs, I think a lot of this is an effort to restrict a person from being able to have something that is better than the military. If I recall correctly, there was a certain instance that happened in Katrina where a guy was interviewed and he said, yeah, they're just simply trying to take these things away because our equipment is obviously better than theirs. Which brings me to Obama. Now, guys, when Barack Obama was in office, he pumped up the gun control rhetoric like crazy, and I've always had a theory, like many others out there, that Obama's ultimate goal was not to be running the United States through the United States or even through Biden, who, by the way, many people have asserted that he is doing. However, I personally feel that, Let's just say that seeing how Biden fired Susan Rice and Ron Klain is no longer there, it just feels to me like Obama does not have the influence that you might would think that he has. He obviously has some influence, but it's probably through Kamala Harris more so than Joe Biden. Just figure I'd throw that out there. May even do a video on that on the Claymore channel. By the way, as you guys know, this right here is on Short Time of Prepping, which by the way is about to be renamed Gear Issue 33. So the thing is this right here. When you actually pay close attention and you actually look at the situation, even if they were to go through the United Nations, and I'll give you guys a quick story here in a second, the United Nations overall military force numbers is not exactly what we call a force number that is high enough to actually confiscate anything. You also have to understand something else too, that once something goes rural, next thing you know, you're moving through territory that you don't know. Even if it's tanks and vehicles and Jeeps and LAVs and stuff or Amtraks, you're still having a problem. Or what if the federal government decided they wanted to use planes, bomb the hell out of a place? Why would you do that? I mean, if anything, if you bomb some piece of land or a farmer's piece of land, the only thing you're doing is giving him a head start at plowing his next crop. Chances are it's probably not going to occur. It doesn't make any damn sense to do so. However, the government obviously does desire to do that. I think what they're trying to do, as I mentioned earlier, with the whole FRTs and all that stuff there being seized or being, going after fines and all that stuff there, I think that what they're doing is creating more and more nuisances so that way the military might actually match up better against the civilian. A civilian class that, by the way, is a lot of ex-law enforcement, a lot of hunters, a lot of sharpshooters, and definitely a lot of military personnel who will not stand for this. You have a right to own a firearm. It's called the Second Amendment of the United States, and quite frankly, it shall not be infringed. It's one of the main reasons why I'm not in favor of any gun laws at all. Except, of course, the normal background check that you get when you go buy a gun. And even that right there, in my opinion, is morally questionable because it is your right to own a firearm. I've made this point perfectly clear, especially in the red flag law video, that even if it's somebody with a mental disorder, I am not okay with taking away their right to self-defense. That's just me. Okay, I'm not okay with that. But still, at the same time, though, as you know, the federal government obviously desires to do so. Now, here's a little story I'm going to tell you before we move on to the next part. I'm working at Dunham Sports, which is the gun store that I worked at here in the town that I live in. I've been there close to a year. I put in my 2 weeks notice. It's 2016. The presidential election is going on. Hillary Clinton, we had just found out, is very, very much in favor of an Australian-style gun confiscation, which, by the way, I can go ahead and tell you right now, people just aren't going to hand them over. Most people aren't. You'll find some dumbasses out there who will do that, which, by the way, I've already said, selling back guns is a bad idea because you're not going to get the money back that you actually sold them for, not to mention the fact that they're obviously doing this to pay you off because they're trying to give you the sense of false security. Here's the deal. I was sitting behind the gun counter, and a guy that I grew up with, lived in the same neighborhood, showed up to the gun counter. We're talking, and he said, well, Paul, I'm going to use my real name here. Paul, we just have to listen to Obama talk about how it was the United States had this massive gun problem. I got the impression that he wants NATO. He was trying to say that so that way NATO or the United Nations could say, look, if you don't get this problem under control, we're going to step in. My immediate response to that was good luck with that because NATO's military force is just not that strong. It would take China with Russia, with all of Europe all together to even mount some type of effort that, quite frankly, would probably end up being fruitless, especially given the amount of dead that would occur within the initial 2 months of the attack on the country itself. It's more than likely never going to happen. However, as I've said before, though, that does not mean that there is not a desire to do so. Take a look at what's going on at the southern border. I talked about this in a Red Dawn scenario video to see if it was actually realistic. I do think that some of the people coming across the border, and I know YouTube's probably going to want to strike this video if I say this, but I'm going to say it right now. I do think that some of the people coming across the border are bad actors with actual honest-to-God intention to actually destroy the country itself, cause a civil war, mostly through the racial divisions in the Hispanic and black communities. Pretty sure you guys have seen what the hell was going on in Chicago. Pretty sure you guys see how it is that black people were not exactly happy with the fact that Hispanics are being rolled in there at a ridiculous rate and resources are being given to them rather than the blacks that already live there. I think the idea is to create a civil war in the cities and a civil war inside the streets, which, by the way, I've always assessed that if there was ever a civil war in the United States, it would more than likely be in the cities where the left-wing communists would try to attempt with Antifa and BLM to overtake the cities itself and overtake the city legislatures, which I still think is a fruitless effort, seeing how it is that the cities get the vast majority of their supplies, their food, and everything from rural areas. So, once again, another fruitless effort. Yes. And I mean, yes. They have proven on several occasions that they have a desire to take away our firearms. They have proven on several occasions that they have a desire to go after what it is that we have a right to. They have proven on several occasions that they want to legislate this. But let me say this really quick. Legislation. 2012 or 2013, right after Sandy Hook, Dianne Feinstein tried to get a AR-15 ban put in place. You needed 60 votes to legislate. She could not get her own party on board with it. Now, the Democratic Party of today is much, much more ruthless. However, the problem is this right here. You're still going to have a hard time, especially given our Senate map, to get that type of legislation done regardless of who's got the Senate, who's got Congress. There's always going to be somebody who's going to back out. A lot of these Democrats that are in red states will not go along with it because their reelection efforts matter on that. However, you've also seen where it is that after someone gets reelected, they'll then turn right back around and screw the people over. You can legislate this all you want, but actual confiscation itself will more than likely not occur because they know they're poking a bear. Go back to Virginia and the 2A rally. Over 20,000 people showed up to that, and they immediately said to themselves, look, man, you're not going to take our stuff away from us. It's just the way that it is. This type of stuff right here can, in fact, occur, as most of you already know. But the thing is this right here, once again, this right here has to be said. Logistically, it's a nightmare, and more than likely, there's always going to be something pulling them back. However, that does not mean that you should not be, how do I say, ready for the possibility of them doing so. There are several great Second Amendment channels up here. Guns and Gadgets is great. Who else? Calling on Noir. Legally Armed America is good. Mr. Guns and Gear. There's also Armed Scholar. He's good. A lot of good channels out there. A lot of very good channels that make a lot of good content that actually points you in the right direction when it comes to the Second Amendment. A lot of great shooter channels as well. Hickok 45 is my personal favorite, even though he's now mostly on Rumble, especially seeing how YouTube decided to demonetize his channel. Fact of the matter is this here. The desire to take away guns is obviously there, but logistically, it's probably freaking impossible to do so. However, this does not mean that you should not still fight for your Second Amendment rights. You should fight for every single one of your rights of the Constitution that are ingrained in you by God, really. You should be able to fight for every single one of them as hard as possible. Anything goes. This is right here is how important this issue is. And don't think for a second that they will not try. However, as I've said before on several occasions, that should they try, it will more than likely end up being a fruitless effort. Guys, John Claymore here, short time of prepping. I just figured I'd go ahead and throw this video out here and kind of close down this series and give you guys my personal thoughts. I'm pretty sure some of you guys in the comment section will probably have some additional thoughts as well. I would love to hear them. We'll probably revisit this topic maybe a year from now, especially when we start going into more scenario-based stuff. Of course, that channel will more than likely be on my main channel, seeing how we're going to mostly just straight veteran issues and military issues on this channel instead of entertaining other stuff. Time to take things seriously. Make sure you guys hit that like button. If you think I've earned your subscription, please subscribe. Also, share the video. Share it with your friends. Share it with your family. Leave a comment in the comment section. I'd love to get you guys' thoughts, and I'll see you guys later.